Well, thank you, my love. Isn't Heidi going to make a fantastic First Lady? And she's my best friend in the whole wide world. God bless the great state of Iowa. I spent most of last week in Washington, D.C., so it is great to be back in America. It's been an interesting couple of weeks in Washington. The Speaker of the House announced that he's going to resign. You know, a lot of the press are speculating who's the next speaker going to be. I've said I'm going to stay out of it. I'm not going to take a position. But I will describe the kind of person that the next speaker should be. The next speaker should be a strong conservative. Amen. The next speaker should be someone who takes seriously honoring the commitments we've made to the men and women who elected us. Well, you know, the press wasn't happy with that. They kept asking, saying, give me a name, give me a name, give me a name. I said, all right, fine. Here in Iowa, I said, all right, I'll give you a name. How about for the next Speaker of the House, Mark Levin? Can you imagine the great one as Speaker? Just picture how those negotiations with the Senate would go. Mitch! We're going to do the right thing. We're going to stand for the Constitution. Do you understand me? That's what we're going to do. And that's what Mitch would do. That would be real leadership. Yeah. Well, and you know, the last 2 weeks also Pope Francis was in Washington. It was really incredible to sit on the floor of the House of Representatives and listen to the Pope address a joint session of Congress. I will note, however, the press conference at the White House the day before, that got a little awkward. Every time the reporters addressed a question to Your Holiness, Obama would answer. Well, and then the very next day, President Xi of China was in Washington. President Xi met with Obama. You know, news outlets all across the world covered this momentous meeting between the world's most powerful communist and the President of China. You know, we are here today because our country's in crisis. We're here today because we're bankrupting our kids and grandkids. Because our constitutional rights are under assault from Washington each and every day. And because America has receded from leadership in the world. And it's made the world a much more dangerous place. And yet I'm here this afternoon with a word of hope and encouragement and exhortation. All across the state of Iowa, all across this nation, people are waking up. And so I want to ask everyone here to look forward. Look forward to January 2017. If I am elected president, let me tell you what I intend to do on the first day in office. The first thing I intend to do in office is revoke every single illegal and unconstitutional executive action taken by this president. President Obama likes to say he's got a phone and he's got a pen. Well, you live by the pen, you die by the pen. And my pen has got an eraser. But sadly, The corruption has not been limited just to the White House. It's extended across every agency in the federal government. The second thing I intend to do on the first day in office is instruct the U.S. Department of Justice to open an investigation into Planned Parenthood and these horrible videos. And to prosecute any and all criminal violations by that organization. The administration of justice should be blind to party or ideology. The only fidelity at the Department of Justice should be to the laws and the Constitution of the United States.
That's right.
The third thing I intend to do on the first day in office is instruct the Department of Justice and the IRS and every other federal agency that the persecution of religious liberty ends today. That means that every serviceman and woman has the right to seek out and worship the Lord God Almighty with all of his heart, mind, and soul, and his superior officer has nothing to say. That means that the Little Sisters of the Poor, a Catholic charity being persecuted by the Obama administration, will find that the case against them has been dismissed. Fourth thing I intend to do on the first day in office is rip to shreds this catastrophic Iranian nuclear deal. The single greatest national security threat facing America is the threat of a nuclear Iran. And we need a commander-in-chief who will stand up in unequivocal terms and say, under no circumstances will the nation of Iran, led by a theocratic Ayatollah who chants death to America, under no circumstances will Iran be allowed to acquire nuclear weapons. Fifth thing I intend to do on the first day in office is begin the process of moving the American embassy in Israel to Jerusalem, the once and eternal capital of Israel. You know, a lot of presidential candidates, both Democrats and Republicans, have made that very same promise. And yet inevitably, when they get to the White House, they don't do it. Their teams come to them and they say, you know, if we do that, it'll make other folks in the Middle East really, really unhappy with us. Well, if you hadn't noticed, they're already pretty unhappy with us. And the single biggest difference between me and the other very fine men and women standing on that debate stage is that with me, when I tell you I'm going to do something, I'm going to do exactly what I said I would do. That's day one. There are 365 days in a year. 4 years in a presidential term. 4 years and a second term. By the end of 8 years, there are going to be a whole lot of newspaper reporters and editors and journalists that check themselves into therapy. In the days that follow, I will go to Congress and we will repeal every word of Obama. We will pass common sense health care reform that makes health insurance personal and portable and affordable and keeps government from getting in between us and our doctors. In the days that follow, I will instruct the U.S. Department of Education, which should be abolished, I will instruct the Department of Education that Common Core ends today. And that means that what y'all are taught in school is not decided by some stranger thousands of miles away in Washington, D.C., but it's decided by your mommy and daddy and your teacher and the local school board and the community you live in. In the days that follow, we will rebuild the military.
Yes.
And we will honor the commitments made to our soldiers and sailors and airmen and Marines. And that includes protecting the rights of every serviceman and woman to keep and bear arms and protect themselves. That means the next time a jihadist walks into a recruiting center in Chattanooga, he's going to encounter the business end of firearms wielded by a dozen Marines. In the days that follow, we will finally secure the borders and end sanctuary cities. We will stop releasing violent, criminal, illegal aliens, and we will pass case law. You know, next week, the United States Senate is going to vote on legislation that I've co-authored with Iowa's own Senator Chuck Grassley to end sanctuary cities now. It provides that any city under a Democratic mayor, a Democratic city council that stands up and says we will defy federal immigration laws will find that its federal money is cut off. And it also includes in that legislation Kate's Law that I introduced, named for Kate Steiner, a beautiful young woman who was murdered in San Francisco by an illegal alien who entered this country over and over and over again with multiple felony convictions, and yet he was never stopped. This provides that any illegal alien with an aggravated felony who enters this country faces a mandatory minimum of 5 years in prison. Now, a lot of Democrats, when they're campaigning, they say they want to secure the borders. They say they're against illegal immigration. Well, the vote next week will be an interesting test of that. Most observers expect Democrats to vote party line in favor of preserving sanctuary cities, to vote party line against incarcerating violent, criminal, illegal aliens. And this is going to be a moment, a time for choosing for every Senate Democrat to determine who they stand for. What I can tell you is this: whatever happens next week, if I am elected president, we will finally have a president willing to enforce the laws, and mark my words, we will secure our borders. In the days that follow, we will take on the EPA. And the CFPB, and the alphabet soup of federal agencies that have descended like locusts on small businesses and farms and ranches, killing jobs throughout this country. You know, a couple of years back, I was out in West Texas, and I asked folks there, I said, what's the difference between regulators and locusts? I said, well, the thing is, you can't use pesticides on the regular. And this old West Texas farmer, he leaned back and said, want to bet? And in the days that follow, I will go to Congress, and we will pass fundamental tax reform. We will pass a simple flat tax. So that every American can fill out his or her taxes on a postcard. And when we do that, we should abolish the IRS. There are about 90,000 employees at the IRS. We need to padlock that building. Take all 90,000 and put them down on our southern border. Now, to our friends in the media, I say that somewhat tongue-in-cheek. But you know, if you think about it, sir, imagine you traveled thousands of miles in the blazing sun. You're swimming the Rio Grande, and the first thing you see is 90,000 IRS agents. You turn around and go home too. Now, some of y'all may be thinking, all of this makes sense to me. It's simple common sense. Live within your means.
Yep.
Don't bankrupt our kids and grandkids.
Yep.
Follow the Constitution.
Yep.
But can it be done?
Yep.
Can we do it? You're right. You know, Scripture tells us there's nothing new under the sun. I think where we are today is very, very much like the late 1970s. The same failed economic policies. The same misery, stagnation, and malaise. The same feckless and naive foreign policies. In fact, the very same countries, Russia and Iran, openly laughing at and mocking the President of the United States. Now, why is it that that analogy gives me so much hope and optimism? Because we remember how that story ended. All across this country, millions of men and women rose up and became the Reagan Revolution. And it didn't come from Washington. Washington despised Ronald Reagan. By the way, if you see a candidate who Washington embraces, run and hide. It came from the American people, and it turned this country around. We went from misery and stagnation to booming economic growth, to millions lifted out of poverty into prosperity and the American dream. We went from our hostages languishing in Iran to winning the Cold War and tearing the Berlin Wall to the ground. Why am I so optimistic? Because the same thing is happening again. All over Iowa and all over this country, people are waking up. You know, 6 months ago, when we launched this campaign at Liberty University, the New York Times promptly opined, Cruz cannot win. Because the Washington elites despise him. I kind of thought that was the whole point of the campaign. Look, if you think things are going great in Washington, that we should keep heading in the same basic direction, just kind of fiddle around the edges, then I ain't your guy. On the other hand, if you think Washington is fundamentally broken, that there is a bipartisan corruption of career politicians in both parties who get in bed with lobbyists and special interests and grow and grow and grow government, and we need to take power out of Washington and back to we the people. That is what this campaign is all about. Let me close with this. You know, for all of us, freedom isn't some abstract concept we read about in school. Freedom is real, it's personal in our families. You know, for me, I think about my mom. My mom is Irish and Italian, born in Wilmington, Delaware. Blue-collar family. Her mom was the second youngest of 17 kids. They were Irish Catholic. They didn't know what else to do on a Saturday night. My mom became the first person in her family ever to go to college. Now my grandfather, my mom's dad, was a difficult man. He was a drunk. And he didn't think women should be educated. And he especially didn't think his daughter should be the first person in the family to go to college. Well, my mom stood up to her dad. She ended up going to Rice University, graduating in 1956 with a degree in math. She went on to work at Shell as a computer programmer. Now, when I was a kid, my mom used to tell me she very deliberately didn't learn how to type. She said, look, it was the 1950s. I understood the world I was living in. She said, I didn't want to be walking down the hall and have some man walk up to me and say, sweetheart, would you type this for me? My mom wanted to be able to smile very, very sweetly and with a clean conscience say, I would love to help you out, but I don't know how to type. I guess you're going to have to use me as a computer programmer instead. You know, my mom turned 80 last year. She is a woman of incredible character and courage. She's been a best friend to me my whole life. She's an unbelievable mom and grandmother to our two little girls, Caroline and Catherine. Caroline is 7. Anyone here 7? So our daughter Caroline is a 7 year second grade. Second grade's pretty cool. And then Catherine's 4. Anyone 4? You're 4 when you turn 5. February. That's awesome. My daughter Catherine turns 5 in October 27th. You're 5. 5 is pretty cool, isn't it? 5 and a half. Okay. We would not forget the half. That's what we're fighting for.
Yeah.
That is exactly why we're here. You know, I also think about my dad. My dad, Pastor Ted Cruz. He was born in Cuba, and he grew up in Cuba. And as a teenager, he began fighting in the Cuban Revolution, fighting against Batista, a cruel dictator. When he was 17 years old, they threw my dad in prison. And they tortured my father. He fled Cuba in 1957. He came to America. He was 18 years old, and he couldn't speak English. He had nothing except $100 in his underwear. I actually don't advise carrying money in your underwear. He got a job washing dishes. Made 50 cents an hour. And he worked 7 days a week. He paid his way through school. And he and my mom went on to start a small business together. Today, my father's a pastor. He travels the country preaching the gospel. Now, my whole life, my father's been my hero. But you know what I find most incredible about his story? How commonplace it is. Every one of us in this room, we have a story just like that in our backgrounds. Some of us, it's us. Others, it's our parents. Others, it's our great-great-great-grandparents. But what ties Americans together, each and every one of us gathered here today, is that we are the children of those who risked everything for freedom.
Yeah.
And that, I believe, is the fundamental DNA of what makes us Americans, that we value liberty and opportunity above all else. That is why I'm so optimistic. When I was a kid, my dad used to say to me over and over again, when we faced oppression in Cuba, I had a place to flee to. If we lose our freedom here, where do we go? That is why we're all here. Because the men and women in this room, we are not prepared to go quietly into the night.
Right.
We are not willing to give up on our children and grandchildren.
Yeah.
And if we continue to come together, to stand together, if we fight together for freedom, if we fight together for the Constitution, if we come together as one, as we the people, then we can once again bring back that last best hope for mankind, that shining city on a hill that is the United States.